Deirdre Verbo here, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Seniors, Memory Care Issues, Alzheimer's, Dementia, and Parkinson's. Join us every Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock. Feel free to ask your questions right below, and we'll be happy to answer them. So many of you know me already, but I'm Deirdre Verbo. I'm author of Home to Home, the Step-by-Step Senior Housing Guide, and also Senior Advocate and Senior Housing Specialist. So I wrote this book and this workbook to help seniors plan and prepare for their future with their loved ones and families. And it gives you step-by-step information on what to do with your finances, where to find everything, who to go to, if you want to stay in your house, what your wishes are, where your will is, your healthcare directives. And it goes through everything you need to know and your loved ones need to know, so you're leaving them prepared for if anything happens, if you fall and have to go to the hospital or have to go into a nursing home or anything that might happen, it leaves them with a whole roadmap on what to do. I also am a real estate investor, and I love to buy homes. Most of my homes I buy from seniors who want to move on. We buy them in cash, and seniors can move on, leave their stuff. We'll take care of everything. So if you're looking to sell a home, just give me a call. If you'd like a book and you like to stay in your home or sell your house, I sell these on Amazon, but I'm very, very happy to send you one for free. I'll give you my number at the end of the show. I'm sending out lots of them and happy to do so. And so I started a home. It's opening up July 1. It is in Shelton. It's called Just Like Home, the Dogwood Home. I started a residential care home for seniors with memory care issues. This is my favorite topic. And it's opening up in 2 weeks, and it's a home for just 6 seniors. It is a beautiful ranch on 1 acre property, 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, big den, living room, kitchen, where the seniors will all live as a family with round-the-clock care, food, supervision, entertainment, everything in, gorgeous private backyard, big enclosed deck, and it's for seniors with memory care issues, so they could feel like they are home, and it's a beautiful place. So if you're interested in a tour or to hear more about it, give me a call. We can only take 6 seniors, so it'll fill up fast. Well, today we have a special guest, and people always want to know, what are the legalities? What should we do with the money, with the finances? Who do we turn to? What is a long-term care, elder care? What does that look like? Today we have a special guest, attorney Vincent Liberti, Jr. He's from Halloran and Sage, and Halloran and Sage have 6 offices all over the state with more than 100 attorneys. And Vincent specializes in elder care and elder law and estate planning and probate practice. So he's a great guy to know and somebody you want to talk to, because you do need a plan. And you don't want to plan last minute, because that's not a plan. And anything could happen. And so many people go into assisted living and care homes in an emergency, like right from the hospital. They fall, they break their hips, they can no longer be at home. And that's not the thing you want to do or the time you want to plan. So Vincent's going to tell you a little bit about himself, but he empowers his clients by providing asset protection through developing their personal estate planning and business models. He advises them in efficiently acquiring, holding, and distributing their assets in the most optimal and tax-proficient ways. He represents clients with Medicaid planning as well. His practice encompasses matters dealing with wealth acquisition, preservation, and transfer using wills, trusts, and sophisticated estate planning and techniques, capital gains, gift and estate tax analysis, asset protection methods, and so much more. So he's here to talk to us a little bit about all of that. And I'm going to welcome him right now. So won't you join us in a big warm welcome to Vincent Liberti. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you so much for coming on. So I guess you heard me talk about you a little bit.
I did.
Maybe you could tell us first a little bit about yourself. Do you have a family, and how did you get into this practice, and what is it all about?
Well, I have a family. I'm married. I have a 22-year-old daughter, and we all have different places in the house on computers, working all day long in the last 3 months.
Of course.
Believe it or not, I got into this traveling around Europe my senior year of college, and I realized this is nice here, but everyone else is interviewing. What are you going to do with your life, kid? And I decided to become a lawyer. And 27 years later, after passing the bar, here I am, balding and gray and a lot of experience.
Basically, you didn't want to look for a job, so you went to law school?
Well, I studied engineer, so all the big companies in the fall went to the college, and that's where they had the tables and everything. Well, I was in Europe backpacking and having a great time. So I said, "Oh, I didn't plan this one well." So I just thought about it, and I realized this is what I wanted to do, and it was scary, but I did it.
Good decision.
So far,
yeah. So good.
Yeah.
Excellent. So elder law, is that something you got into right off the bat?
No, I actually went out on my own. In 1992 is when I went out, and partners were getting fired. It was not as bad as 2008, but I went out on my own, and my family's involved in real estate. So I did real estate and foreclosures, and the other side was I did estate planning. And then the market changes, but you can, pretty much always do something and develop a good practice. With the estate planning, elder issues came about. In fact, elder law really is estate planning. Estate planners kind of focus more on the Social Security and the Medicaid, and they just started calling it elder law. But it is really estate planning. That just developed. I also went to get a post degree called an LLM in estate planning and elder law. So that was an extra 3 years after law school. So
wow,
definitely
That's
focused.
3 years after law school?
Yeah.
Are you a double attorney?
No, it's just we get to put different initials at the end of your name, which I never do anyways.
You really didn't want to go for a job. You just kept wanting to go to school. Okay, I guess you love to learn.
I do. I still do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I love to learn too. So when should somebody start, like long-term care planning or elder planning, or how do you start it? What's a good time?
Well, keep in mind first, if you might need Medicaid, there's a 5-year look back on all activities, transferring, gifting, income. So you don't wait until there's an event and then talk to a care provider or an elder lawyer. It's probably too late. So, I'm writing a book, and I'm trying to make it so that people understand different stages in your life. There are different things to do for estate planning and preparation. If you get an estate plan, and like you said earlier on, plan in advance, you're already talking to somebody who does estate planning. Hopefully they understand Medicaid and elder law too. They're an estate planning lawyer, not a generalist. I have a little bias there, but when you get older, you have more of the elder and probably the Medicaid issues. You need an estate planner that understands that. If you're meeting with that person will say, look, you're X years old. We need to think about stairs, housing, facilities, transferring money. For me, the rule of thumb is men around 78, the bodies start falling apart. Women a few years later. Women usually live 5-6 years longer. So you get to your 70s, we have to start thinking and planning and strategizing.
So when does somebody need Medicaid? How do they know? You mean just to go into like a nursing home or assisted living without using up all your own assets?
It doesn't work that easily. You could have an event. Let's not make it long drawn out dementia. Just say you break your hip, you have to do rehab. Let's say things develop and they realize, or you have a stroke. Let's make it that way. You have to do rehab. You can't go back home, or it's doubtful. You have to do a home assessment. The doctors say no, spouse can't care for, usually the guy goes down first. So she can't care for him. She can't help him get to the bathroom. We have to do a facility. It's for an example. Okay, how much does that cost? Could be $15,000 a month. Whoa, how do I pay for that? Well, you either have long-term care insurance, or you need to do some type of a spend down plan and eventually file for Medicaid. Now Medicaid is a safety plan, safety net. So you're not going to have $1 million and then apply for Medicaid. You may have $1 million and then plan, and then over time we can shift the money, and then you go on Medicaid. But here, let me give you an example. In most states, the person who applies for Medicaid, we call them an institutional spouse, particularly if they're going into a facility. They can't have more than $2,000 in their name. Connecticut, it's $1,600. There's an option by the federal law that states can choose.
The
So,
house can be in their name, right?
say that again.
A house.
No, well, we're not talking house. House, if you're married, can go to the other spouse. You just have to
So the house is
transfer.
exempt, no matter how much equity you have.
You just can't keep it in the person who applies for Medicaid. Institutional spouse can't keep it in their name. So the day before you apply, you put it in her name, in our example. The house, car would be in her name, one car. And he can't have more than 16 in Connecticut, $1,600. She can't have more than a certain dollar amount. Let's just call it 126. It's not a whole number. 126,000. You look at it, at least for Connecticut, on the day that you went to the hospital or day of institutionalization. You look at the full assets. She gets that 126. He gets the 1,600. Anything over that, you're paying to the home, or you're going to do some type of planning, a new car, fix up the house a little bit, put into maybe an annuity until you get to those limits or below those limits, and then Medicaid picks up your care.
Can you have money in your IRA, or does that count?
Counts.
What about the pension plan?
It all counts.
Oh.
Remember,
so the house and the car are exempt. So
house and car shift to the non-applicant spouse. If you don't have a spouse, there's an issue of, will you go back home in the next 6 months, according to your doctor? If not, you better sell that house. They're going to force that.
Oh, so if you are single, or the second to pass, if you're married, and you have a house, that house is in jeopardy.
Correct.
Oh, so if you're single or widowed, and the house is still in your name, what should you be doing?
Are we likely within the 5-year look back? Because if we are, it may be too late.
Let's say, you're planning, thinking like, you have at least 5 years before you're gonna.
Well in advance, you might do things like transfer it to kids or into a trust for benefit of kids, hold back a life estate, so you're at least allowed to stay there. A life estate is a property interest, so you still have rights. They can't just kick you out. Those are options we might do. But remember, if you go on Medicaid, that life use it still has a value. So you have to deal with that when you apply for Medicaid. You could be over that $1,600 asset limit.
The life estate still has a value.
Correct. It's actually bifurcating. What we call as fee simple is what we own. Life estate is a present interest. The kids or the trust for the benefit of kids is a future interest. So you're kind of pulling apart what we call fee simple, how we own assets. It goes back to England, 1300s or so.
So the trust is probably better.
Depends. Trust costs money. If you give it to the kids, they get a divorce. It might go to the spouse. It might go to the spouse's next spouse. It might go to the kids. You might have the property interest being divided up because many kids, bankruptcies, divorces, you may not want that. A trust, you have a trustee or maybe two that manage it for the benefit of the children. Marriage doesn't affect it. Bankruptcy, it's sheltered. But it costs more to create a trust. So we have to weigh it. We have to decide. Your next question would be, can you put it in trust and still have it be for the benefit of the person who owned it? You have to be careful with trust, especially in Connecticut. Generally, no, there are some exceptions. But for the home, you would want the life use for a home asset.
Is it different per state, or is it federal laws trust?
It's both. It's a joint operation. So it's federal law, but the states administer it, and each state is different.
Wow. So what if you do a trust like in one state and then you go live in another state?
You have trust law. You also have to deal with your Medicaid law. So if the trust said you have to apply New York law, you would now have a conflict. And let's say you're in Connecticut, and you're going to probably deal with Medicaid, Department of Social Services. It's called the Uniform UPM, Uniform Policy Manual, that you have to deal with their rules for Medicaid, and they may have to interpret this other state's laws. But you're not going to follow New York law or Rhode Island law just because the trust says that.
So if you did a trust in New York 25 years ago, and now you're 95 years old, and you move near your kids in Connecticut into a nursing home or assisted living facility, upon what, like, you have to then go back and look at New York laws to see what happened when you made the trust, or New York laws today, or
if it's a trust, and let's assume it's irrevocable, it's the only way it would really be of benefit if you have Medicaid. It's like a person. It gets its own tax ID, and it's subject to whatever law that trust says. But if you're receiving Medicaid in the state of Connecticut, you're following those Medicaid rules as Connecticut sees it. So we have to interpret that New York trust and see if it applies or not, if it's an eligible asset, meaning it's countable, or not. And
wow, so that's something somebody has to look into. So, oftentimes you hear that kids, want to move their parents to where they live, closer to where they live when they get older. But if they have a trust in their state, do they have to revisit their trust attorney and figure it out again?
like I said, elder law, it really is a subset of estate planning. So you always want to look at your estate planning too. You want to look at the medical or health planning documents. We don't call them medical powers in Connecticut, but most states they do. Your power of attorney, which is financial. Let me throw another example. You want to look at your will. What happens if you or the community spouse, your husband goes to a facility and you're worrying sick and you die first, and you have that old will that says, I give everything to my spouse. Well, the state gave benefits to your husband. You died. Your probate estate gives everything to your husband. And assuming you give more than that $1,600, the state will say, oh, you have too much. Oh, this is what we gave you. We're going to put a lien on that probate estate of your wife. We're going to get repaid. If there's anything left over, well, sorry, you're overqualified. Spend it down. When you get back below 1,600, then you'll get back on Medicaid. If it's not enough to satisfy, you keep on going. But you just gave, by not changing your will, you just gave money to the state.
Wow.
Or you can change it and give it to the kids.
So you have
or someone else.
Whenever there's something that happens, if you move, somebody passes, somebody goes into a home, you have to revisit it again.
Yeah, it should be a complete estate planning. Again, the subset is elder law underneath it. You want to look at everything. I have a questionnaire that most people probably hate going through it until they do and they get organized. I don't know what it is, 14 pages or so. It asks everything. I mean, you may have assets in, say, California, and that has a different set of laws called a community property, and spouses have different rights with assets than they do in Connecticut, where we use common law. That type of asset classification follows wherever the asset goes. So even though we have a common law in Connecticut, I have to still apply community property law from California. So all these things have to be looked at and analyzed. And as we grow, start pulling, say, from qualified funds, like you said, IRA and 401k, because you're in retirement, we now have to employ income tax on top of estate and gift tax and Medicaid issues. So all of that is estate planning. Wow. Even premarital agreements or postmarital or prenuptials, all those things have to come into play too for estate planning.
Wow, that's a lot to know. That's a lot to figure out. So what about if somebody has money in a pension plan, is that transferable, or an IRA, is that transferable to the other spouse?
Only upon death would it be transferred, and the pension, it depends on what elections you make. You may say, oh, upon retirement, I'll take 50%, and then when I die, 50% goes to spouse. So depends on the election. IRA, it stays in the taxpayer's name until death, and then it goes to designated beneficiaries. So if you, in the case where the spouse died first and the beneficiary of the IRA or 401k was the spouse that was getting Medicaid assistance, yeah, you just gave it to the state up to the amount provided by the state.
So do you have to spend down your IRA then? So the IRA stays with you. So if you go into assisted living, do you have to spend down your whole IRA first before you can get any benefits if you're doing a spend down?
There might be some tricks of the trade where you might be able to do a 1035 IRS exchange and get it into an annuity, a certain type of annuity, but that's a tricky asset. It's not like you just do a deed and transfer it to the spouse.
So let's just go back for a minute, Vincent, because this is really cool, but you're getting into pretty detailed stuff, and I know you're going down. So let's just
going down the rabbit hole. Yes.
Simplify it. Let's say somebody basically just has a house and a pension, and basically they're living off their pension and their Social Security income, and they have a house, and they're not married. What should they do? Should they be putting their house in a trust for their kids and just living off their money, just in case there's a look back for 5 years? And explain the look back. Actually, this is what we did with my mother-in-law, because we sold her house, and so she had close to $500,000. We put it in a trust because she just had her, her Social Security, a little bit of savings, and she lived off that. And the money that the trusts made, she lived off of, like the interest. And then 8 years later, we had to put her in a nursing home because she had dementia. So then it was totally paid for because it was a 5-year look back.
What state was that?
Connecticut? Well, we started it in New York. Then we moved her near us in Connecticut, but we didn't have a problem. And then we moved her back to New York for a nursing home.
Did she ever need Medicaid?
She went on to Medicaid in New York.
In New York. Yeah. See, in Connecticut, it's tough doing it that way. You appear to have created an income-only trust. Connecticut might say whatever that guaranteed income or whatever the income percentage that goes to the person who made the trust, they'll look to take that percentage of the principal or corpus, the stuff in the trust. So it may be at risk. Connecticut's really strict and tough. Massachusetts used to have income-only trusts. They're getting tough on that. I think Rhode Island might still allow it, but you really have to be careful. And that ruling it emanates from a footnote in a case. So the state of Connecticut has one of the worst budgets of any state, and Medicaid is a very expensive element in the budget. So they're going to want to be strict.
Are you saying that because it was formed in New York and she went back to live in New York that we were okay, but if she stayed in Connecticut, it could have been a different scenario?
It could have been.
So what if, we're in Connecticut, so let's talk about Connecticut. So what if somebody's in Connecticut and just has this simple thing? They have a $500,000 house to sell, $1 million house to sell, whatever it is. And that's basically their asset besides their Social Security income. They need to come to somebody like you to make a plan and make a trust kind of thing? Is that what they should be doing because of the look back?
Keep in mind, it's difficult to say, let's just take this suit or dress and it's a one size fits all. But we have to analyze everything. So what is the age? What is the longevity of the person? What's the financial and maturity of the children? What's the best thing here? Do I really need to spend money for a trust when there are 2 kids and they're both wonderful, longtime spouses? So it depends. Now, if you're 81 and you want to sell the house and shelter it, very high risk, that's not going to work because we have to put money into a trust or transfer it, which would be into a trust or to kids or to whatever. And then 5 years have to go by before you can apply for Medicaid. Otherwise, it's all kaput. It's all includable, and you'll be ineligible for a time of period. There's a penalty divisor. You multiply that times the value of the property, and that's how many months you're just not eligible. And that's when you have $1,600 to your name, and then you're not eligible. So who's going to pay for the care? So we have to be very careful. So in your example, let's assume we want to put it in a trust. They're young enough. Okay, maybe we keep the house and do the life use, and the remainder after you die is owned by this trust. Maybe you sell it, turn it to cash, you invest it, it's in trust, and you hold your breath and the 5 years goes by. If you're in Connecticut, you may have a problem with an income only. It has to be drafted just right. Maybe it's a fully discretionary trust and you don't know if you're going to get income or principal out of it. Possible. The Department of Social Services still might create a problem and say, no, I don't like that. Distribute it to somebody else, to the other beneficiaries. I want to make sure it doesn't go to you who's applying for Medicaid. So it's tricky.
But they're still doing something.
Well, you do something, but be mindful of that 5-year look back. So don't say tomorrow, and then you're 80 years old or 78 years old and there isn't a 5-year tomorrow. That's the trick. You want to hold the difference is giving it to the state and losing control, having control, but it's not sheltered. People want to have control as long as possible, but then they bump into this 5-year look back period.
So how do you protect yourself if your spouse is older than you, for instance, and you think, they're in ill health? What do you do?
Maybe it's get long-term care insurance. So now that policy will pay for care. And remember before I said that community spouse, the non-applicant spouse gets a certain number. I used example of 126. Let's assume her husband had a long-term care insurance policy for $300,000. $300,000 was paid out. Then he had to go on Medicaid. That community spouse has allowed her 126 plus the 300. So 426 because they use the long-term care policy and the state likes that. They want that. So they'll allow that spouse to have more money.
So a long-term care policy has a cap on it?
It might. It depends. A lot of times you have a 300,000 lifetime X amount per day. You may have an inflation rider. I just use 300 as an example. Some don't. Some just keep going. But keep in mind, behind this is some actuarial person who they have to assess price per age, and a lot of policies have a cap. 300 is kind of typical.
Wow. I mean, you think if it's long-term care, it should be for long-term.
Well, you have to think of it as a contract, and it's insurance, and there has to be some profit there to make it work. Yes, you are transferring risk.
If you're going into a nursing home in Connecticut that could cost you $15,000 to $20,000 a month, you're not getting too far.
Correct.
You're getting 15 or 20 months. Okay. So long-term care policies, best to buy them at what, like age 60?
I always say the sweet spot is in your latter 50s up to 60. It gets more expensive as you get older. But you could be 18 years old and riding a motorcycle and need long-term care. It could happen at any time. It's just what's the probability of it. I always say somewhere in the late 50s, 60. Because you know what? Everyone says it's a lot of money. Yeah, it is. But until you've gone through all this long-term care stuff and rehab with a spouse or aunt or uncle or father or mother, you don't fully appreciate how expensive that is. And it's not just the quantitative, the money. It's harrowing on the family and the spouse that's the caregiver. It drains them of life. And I see it because I might see them every 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They look in the mirror every day and they don't see it, but they're burnt out. It's exhaustive. So I would say if you have $3 million cash, not including the house, for a husband and wife, maybe you're not going to look at long-term care. Anything below it, yeah. The spouse that's much younger, maybe you want to get a policy. I'm not 60 yet, but I made sure my wife has a policy that inflates. A few years ago, the rate for women went up because I realized women live longer. I got my wife to do one in December of that year, so we had the lower rates. And as time goes, I'll just add more to it. So I want to make sure she's covered because she'll live to 100. I'll die at 81. It's just, it'll be around.
But she's like, what? Don't you need the policy? Because when you say she has long-term care, it's on her, not on you, right?
Correct. But if I die younger and she has longevity in her family,
you want her to,
I want her. Somebody's got to take care of her.
Okay.
I'm not going to be around unless she uses she uses my life insurance money for the next guy. Maybe he'll be around. She'll get a nice young guy. But
Oh,
that's not always a good plan.
so she took out long-term care, and then are you planning on taking out long-term care for yourself when you get to be 60?
Yeah, that's the objective.
Okay, very, very good.
Or I get the $3 million of cash, whichever happens first.
So if you have a long-term care policy of, let's say, 300,000, like you're quoting, do you still need the whole trust and the whole estate planning, or is that just taking care of the first 426,000 basically of your assets?
Well, you now are transferring risk to an insurance company, and you have money for care. Now you need to assess where you're getting the care. If it's at home, it might be $4,000 a month. If it's in a memory care facility, it might be the $15,000, $16,000 a month. Okay, given the assets you have, given the life insurance, or the long-term care insurance, sorry, how many months do we have? Okay, what's expected longevity? Okay, you have excess assets. They'll be at risk. You have a spouse who's, let's just say, younger. She could be at risk, or he. We need to do some other stuff here. Shifting the house, looking at the assets, maybe the trust, and we still have that 5-year look back. So a lot of variables, and it depends on each case, each couple or person that comes in.
Wow.
You may not want to do a long-term care policy. You might be able to take cash in a life insurance policy and do this tax exchange and get a life insurance with some long-term care in it. You might want to do a rider on long life insurance policies. There are these short-term, like emergency care, like 6 months, no more than a year policies that you can get. Maybe that's a cheaper version or option that fits the couple. So it really depends on what scenario I have. Assets, life.
Can you explain, Vincent, what a life insurance for long-term care policy is? I never heard of that. What is that?
Generically, we call them a hybrid. You can have a long-term care rider on top of a life insurance policy. You could have a product that has long-term care and life insurance in it. There are guidelines on how much life insurance you have given the long-term care. That's the backdoor complicated stuff, but those are all options.
Wait, so does that mean, let's say you take out $1 million life insurance policy and it's a hybrid, like 300,000 of that could be if you need long-term care?
And probably going to be higher.
Pass away. Like what does it mean?
Yeah. Well, what would generally happen is, let's just say you have 300,000 of long-term care, 500,000 life insurance. If you died without needing long-term care, you have the death benefit. There might be some cash growth in there too. It depends on the policy. Now, let's say you have the full 500,000, but you use 300,000 of it for the long-term care. There's 200 left. Or let's just say there's I forgot the name of it. It's Lincoln. They came up with the hybrid, and you put just a lump sum of $300,000. And let's say at some point you said, "No, I don't like this." You can get your capital investment back. You don't get the growth, but you can get it back.
So is this only whole life insurance or also term?
It doesn't work for term. Term you rent. You need whole because there's cash involved. And to do an exchange, you're using that cash to purchase the long-term care. So it definitely is whole life or permanent, and you need enough cash to do that.
So let me understand this. So you have a whole life insurance policy for $500,000. And you say, like, I want it to kick in if I need long-term care, and it will pay up to the $500,000, or do you have to have the cash built up in it? And that's
what you would do is say, insurance broker, I really don't need life insurance. Kids are gone, mortgage is paid, we're doing all right. Long-term care. I said long-term care. I meant to say 401k. 401k's there. I'm not worried about that. I mean, we bought burial plots. We're good. But what I just talked to my lawyer, and what I realized, this long-term care stuff could be expensive. what can I do? I know I can let it lapse and just take the cash. Oh, there's a section in the code that we can convert it, exchange it for long-term care. It's a like kind of exchange. So we'll have some type of life insurance in it, but we're going to add on this long-term care insurance. Let me look at the numbers. What's your age? Oh, you got to do the forms, you smoke, all that kind of stuff. All right, let me see what I got. It's going to cost X amount. How much is your cash in that life insurance? Okay, we're good. We're short. This is what we have to do to make it up. Here's the new policy.
Okay, so let me understand this now. So you have a whole life insurance policy. Let's say you built up $200,000 in there. What you built up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that is going to buy long-term care insurance. The $200,000 you built up is buying insurance, or you're just using your long-term care money you built up. I mean, your insurance money you built up for long-term care, or are you buying long-term care insurance with the extra money in your whole life policy?
Think of it as trading in your car and getting a newer car, or trading in your car and getting a truck because you now have a vehicle and it carries stuff. That's what you're doing. You're relinquishing your life insurance, and the cash that is in there is yours. So you can use that to buy a new policy. That new policy happens to be a hybrid, has long-term care and life insurance in it. And they fool with the numbers based on law and what you would need. And of course, what you can buy with that cash.
So you're converting it. So you're not really keeping your whole life insurance intact. Okay, so let's convert this. It's quite fascinating because I think this comes up a lot because people are leaving their kids. You don't need to make your kids rich because you have other assets you may be leaving them. But before you die, who's going to take care of you, right? Without depleting everything. So let's say you want to convert your whole life policy into a hybrid. Are you saying like, oh, I'll take 300 of it, make long-term care, and then take the other 2 or 500 and make it my life insurance? And if you don't need long-term care, you're just out of luck?
Well,
waste that money kind of?
With the hybrids, if you don't use the long-term care, you have more in the life insurance. So your kids get it. That's the idea. It's typical insurance. It's like auto insurance. You either use it or lose it. You don't get into a car accident. Oh, well. It's not like that with the hybrid. All right, you didn't use much or any of the long-term care, but that means there's more there for the death benefit, and that goes to the kids. A normal long-term care policy, just the traditional, you didn't use it, there's nothing left. So that's the benefit or the alluring value of this hybrid.
Can you start out buying a hybrid?
Sure. Why not?
I don't know. I never heard of it. It's pretty cool.
Oh, no. It's a neat thing, but it may not be exactly what you need. Like I said, you might do a rider or a short term, or if you have enough, a rich aunt and you don't need insurance. It all depends on your scenario, your situation, longevity, objectives, cash, income flow. You really want to look at all of it. I do the estate planning analysis. I'm not an insurance person looking to sell a product or one thing. I'm looking to more holistically look at how do I solve the problem of this couple, and let me ask lots of questions and drive them nuts, but really understand what's going on and figure out where we need to go. And a lot of times I use a care provider, like I don't know if Elena Goggin, I think she's been on your show. She helps me a lot and I help her, and you don't want to pay a lawyer to go to different facilities or to do other stuff, but that's where she comes in, and it's just wonderful. Now you're really protected, because I can tell you, having a father that had a stroke and mother trying to take care of him, you get old quickly. It's very difficult to migrate through the Medicare, Medicaid, and all those health forms. You're in a bureaucracy. It's not simple. It's not easy. So to have people help you.
Right. And the worst part is when you're doing that for your spouse, you might not be young either.
Well, you
could also be in your 80s and, something happens to your spouse, and now you have to figure out this really complicated thing when you're not all all like that clear-headed for many reasons. And it's crazy. You need an advocate to do this for you. And I guess it's where you come in. You're like the advocate for the people to help them figure out their plan, because there's so many routes and people don't even know about them. People don't know.
I had to be difficult with my mother. My father fell 2 times in one day, 4 hours lying on the ground. She couldn't get him up. She's a tiny little Italian woman. My dad's about 180 pounds, 5'10". I finally told her, this is it. If you fall, this is March. If you fall and break a hip, which a lot of times that happens with a woman, pre-COVID, you go into the hospital, could be pneumonia. I mean, it's a petri dish there.
Yeah.
And a lot of women die from pneumonia. Well, now you not only have pneumonia, you have COVID. And I had to tell her, you can't do this. You can't bring him to the bathroom. You can't. And if you get hurt, it's really life-threatening. And who's going to take care of him? And she had found a place. They were quarantined for 15 days. Literally, the caregiver, my mother and my father, drove up. They could not leave the car. They came out with a wheelchair, picked up my father. He was in quarantine for 15 days. And we were thankful that they had a place during this COVID lockdown for my father. I could tell in 2 days, she was just breathing and looked better and thinking better. She wasn't thinking straight. And you get so stressed. She was yelling at my father. They've been together since she was 20. Yeah, I think 20. She lies about her age so much. It's difficult to follow. But and here she is 77, 8, and he's 80. And she was just so stressed.
About it.
Say again?
Why are you telling people her age if she wants to lie about it?
Yeah, well, it's okay. At that age, she should be proud.
So now, did they have long-term care insurance for your dad, or what? What is paying for that? Or just you're paying for it? Or your mom's paying for it?
Now that I'm not going to answer, because then she'll yell at me for that.
Oh, okay. No, I was just thought.
That's finances.
I wasn't trying to pry. I was just like, okay, hopefully you set things up for them, Vincent.
Their oldest son had to help. That was me.
All right, good. Hopefully you set things up for them. And did Elena get involved in doing the assessment for your dad? And
she did.
What? Good.
She did.
So she helped them get into a place and figure out what was up with them.
Well, he was home for a while, so she helped, and he was home. It just got to the point I could see it would hurt my mother too. So I had to step in, and shit isn't like when the lawyer son speaks differently than she, because she's the mom, but it had to be done. And that's another issue I see. I have clients whose kids are in their 50s and 60s, and they are afraid to take charge of, especially dad. Mom's tough. She's always, well, you're the parent now. And it's very hard for them to shift gears. And
it's tough when a parent doesn't want to talk about things. But I just want to tell you something funny I didn't know about. My parents had my mom's aunt living with them for a long time. Her husband had died when she was like 70. So they built an apartment on their house for her, and she lived to be 93. But she used to fall, and my parents couldn't pick her up. And they used to call the police, and the police used to come over and pick her up.
I just heard something from an old college roommate.
Police for stuff like that. That's all I was saying.
An old college roommate in Washington State, where that nursing home was, he actually said, well, maybe we should defund the police a bit, because most of the 911 calls have nothing to do with the police. Maybe we should send a psychologist most times, because it's all, personal stuff. And then you just said this. So without commenting on the political aspects of that, it's like, well, yeah, 911 is abused, but
I didn't even know that's something you could call them for. But they told my parents, call them anytime you need help. I was like, I think I don't know, call the local VA first or something. I don't know what I would do. Call a neighbor. I'd call a neighbor. But yeah, anyway, it was interesting. But yeah, so that's good luck with your dad. How's he doing?
I don't know. I can't go visit him. So just hello every once in a while with a video. I could say when this happens, whenever someone, he's cognitively impaired, and that affected the physical. But when someone's cognitively impaired or dementia, moving them, whether they're in an initial facility and then they have to move to a facility that takes Medicaid, very debilitating. In my father's case, from home into a facility, it's very confusing, and he has off days. He doesn't have what's called sundown. You get to a certain time of day that their faculties, well, they get confused and difficult. He just off because of the change of location, change of routine, and it's been tough. And sometimes he'll just act up and be agitated, like young boy. So it's tough, and that happens all the time. So when you want to find a facility, you really want one that can go straight through to hospice, or if Medicaid might be in the plan, a facility that takes Medicaid, because you could see a huge decline in the health of an individual if you have to move them at a stage of dementia or later, in the latter years. It's tough, so you have to kind of factor that in.
Yeah. Well, I wish them the best. That's a tough one. So, Vincent, is this a very expensive, intensive, long process to, go? It seems like so much to know. Is this like somebody comes to you, what could they expect? Run us through it. You're going to give them this big questionnaire they have to fill out, as you said. Yeah. And then is it all different price points of what it costs to set this up, or can you give us like a range and a time frame?
Different lawyers handle it differently. Some would say, look, pick a number, 10,000, 15,000, they'll do all the state plan, the Medicaid planning, the application and everything. Others could do it hourly. If you have a care provider in there, they may have a certain hourly, and they take away a lot of the things that, in my opinion, you really shouldn't pay the lawyer higher lawyer rate. So it all depends on what I'm called to do. If it's a matter of, we need you to do a caregiver, a financial power, and a medical power, well, that's pretty cheap. I mean, I charge about $250 for each power, and whatever couple of hours it takes to do the care agreement, and that's it at an hourly rate. Now, if you need to do the Medicaid, and you say, here's a box of the last 5 years, or here's an authority, go get the 5 years, I don't want to do anything. Well, that's going to be a lot of time. So it really depends on how much the family member or loved one can do, and that takes away the legal rate, and maybe you shift some to a care provider as well, who can do things that aren't legal, or that a lawyer needs to do. So it does depend on what's needed.
Oh, so you're saying like if they want to go on Medicaid, but they didn't do the whole 5-year look back thing, then
you can't
all their expenses, where they are, where all the money is, and what's going on.
Yeah, you can't file that application without knowing that 5 years. So
wow.
we got to do it. So somebody's got to do it. You don't want to have a lawyer do it at the lawyer's rate, in my opinion. Some lawyers would do that, but
that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. So we have to be smart about it too.
Okay, but they should come to you pretty early, at least you said in their 70s, or if they sell a house, or I guess have some major life change, right? Before somebody gets sick, before they want to sell a house, before they think somebody might pass away or something might happen. Is that what you're suggesting? At least 5 years before?
I would broaden that. You really should get estate planning done at every stage. But then as you get to the latter 60s, early 70s, now we're shifting into maybe this more end stage or end retirement stage of, all right, what money do we have? What are our issues? We had our physicals. Doctor said to watch out for this. Don't have longevity. Have longevity. We start talking about a whole different thing than how are we going to pay for the kids to go to college, and how you're going to pay. What if you die and you have a mortgage? It's a different scenario, different conversation.
So you must be like so busy right now, because are people do they like freak a bit with COVID and like they're coming to you right and left?
For the first 3 weeks of shutdown, everyone said, I don't know. We'll see when it's over. It started building, and somehow on May 20th, it exploded. Everyone wanted to get their estate plan done. People I haven't spoken to in years, at very least a healthcare directive. It is possible. Actually, I've seen it in the American Journal of Medicine. They were so concerned about the 1.2 million that would be on COVID and the scarce resources of respirators. It's possible doctors could put DNR in your file, do not resuscitate, because they deem you on their own, at risk, and it's not worth having the respirators and life support, because we have these, first responders, we have healthier people here, and they were worried about how they were going to allocate it. I have spoken to people in Connecticut hospitals, people on the ground in New York, and someone down on the Cape, and they all say, yeah, that's happening.
Wow.
As we realize the model changed, I would guess it's not happening as much, but that was my concern. But what I did realize is I was probably getting 3 clients and that died per week because they fell and broke the hip. One broke the patella of the kneecap, went into rehab, caught COVID, and died. And it's just boom, really quick. If you're older and you go into these facilities, you're definitely at risk. And the family members were calling me, and it's pretty sad because every phone call, you don't know what's going to happen. But I say
it's been like a wake-up call, I think, for people. Like, even though everybody knows you could die at any moment, you could be in a car accident, right? Anything could happen at any moment. But because of COVID, and you just see like a bus driver, somebody's coughing on him and he's dead. And like it just makes everybody more aware of their circumstance. And I know I did my estate planning. I own homes with a bunch of different people. As a real estate investor, I own rental properties with people. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to leave my kids a mess if anything happened to me. Like, it's bad enough, like you die quick and people are suffering, but then you don't want to leave them with a mess, and they don't even have time to mourn because they have to figure out everything left behind, so.
At the very least, once someone turns 18 or majority age, they should do this advanced healthcare directive, at the very least. And then you have somebody to talk to the doctors. The problem is we didn't have people talking to doctors because everything was shut down. But at the very least, that's what you want to have. Everybody should have that.
So my daughter had a really strange experience. She was teaching in Korea, in South Korea, just like English, after college. She was teaching there for like a year and a half. And another young just graduate who was teaching with her died there. And
of COVID?
No.
Oh.
Died. I don't know what he died of. He was like 23, he was another English teacher from America teaching, as an English teacher. And she didn't know who his parents were or anything. He didn't have a healthcare directive. He had money in a bank account there. She was like finding his parents on Facebook for him to say he died. So she immediately, at like 23, did all her healthcare directives, all her will and everything like that.
Good for her.
Because she was like, wow, this is terrible. Like, we're even in another country and he has all his money here. I don't even know how to, like, his parents, to tell them to figure it out. When
I finish with clients, there's usually a big booklet, 3-ring binder, and I have homework stuff from organizing your assets to how they are transferred, little plastic sheets of copies of your deed to funeral arrangements, just to get organized. And it is an effort. But when people finish, they say, boy, this is great. They bring that book to appointments. And every end of January, I put statements in there because I'm the geek that organizes. My wife is happy. That's why she's going to live for 100. She doesn't worry about the IRS or income tax. So I have to have everything organized and have it all there and call this person. And I have to tell you, the spouses or heirs that have parents and loved ones that do that, their life is much easier. They can mourn better. They can catch their breath. It takes about a year and a half, in my estimation, just to catch your breath when a loved one dies. Your brain goes baby brain. You just can't think. So the more you can help them.
It's so true. My parents had things in a trust, like they retired young in their 50s and they put everything in a trust. And my father had this notion he was dying at 60 because his parents did. And of course he lived to be 81. But, he was like, I have to retire early. I have to get everything settled for my wife because, my parents died. I'm going to die. He didn't die. But he did die a few years ago. And then they redid the trust like a year and a half later. That is exactly how long it took for my mother to get in a headspace to be able to talk about anything. And they redid that to make sure it was up to date for, her, and she has everything all ironed out. But one last thing before you go, because you're just a wealth of information and giving us so much to think about. And I'm taking copious notes. If you see me looking down, I'm a note taker here. So I'm taking notes about everything. I have a 30-year-old son who's not married. I'm advanced health directive. I'm taking notes as you're talking, believe me. Anyway, one last thing. What if you have an elderly parent who does not want to discuss this topic, that will not, I have a father-in-law who will not, he's sickly, he's 80, he will not discuss a will, any advance that he has assets, he will not talk about it. What do you do to start a conversation?
Well, if they're in my office, then they want to talk about it. But if you're assuming, this is some relative of mine or a friend, and they say no, it's their wish. Now, do you want to be, I might have told you my mother's Italian. You want to use that guilt and the shame? Say, okay, just leave the mess to your kids. And I've had some dads say, yep, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, good. And the lawyers will probably get most of the money because they're going to argue. Nah, no problem. It'll help me. But if they say, no, I'm not going to think about it, it's their right. I had a grandmother that
such a mess.
Yeah. Oh, and I've seen it. And you know what? The lawyers do pretty well because it's a mess and they have to do everything. I had a grandmother 6 times a year. She would come in and talk about the will. She just loved to talk. Never signed it. She eventually told me she signed it before she went in for triple bypass surgery. And she said, I thought, if I signed it, I'm going to die. I said, so you're going in for surgery and you're signing it now all as a rush? And she just looked at me, but she didn't die. She lived to 84. She smoked since she was a teenager. And I haven't had anyone die right after signing a will. So
I think this could be his superstition too. Like just talking about it, we'll put it out there, and then and I'm like, oh my gosh, put it out there early enough, and you're okay. And it's inevitable. You're going to die, so you got to plan for it, right? You have to figure it out.
Is he married or single?
Long-term girlfriend of 25 years.
That's even more of a problem. Okay.
But not him. Like I know a lot of my friends have similar issues with their parents that just, dig in and refuse to talk about it. Like, don't worry, I have you covered. Like there's enough money for it. As if they're asking for the money. They're not asking for the money. They're asking for things to be, what are your wishes? What do you want to do? Let's not give it all to the government. Let's figure out now to keep you, or what do you want to do if, you need to go into a home? You just don't want to discuss it. As if that, like your lady, is that's going to make it happen.
Yeah, you can't force people, but maybe it's just too much, or it's timing and they can't handle it, or they don't want to, and their health, their memory, their mind will fail, and somebody will make decisions for them, and it may not be what they want. So I asked my father numerous times, what do you want? What do you want? So, and I've asked my mother, and I remember I was probably 31 and at the Thanksgiving table, and I would say, all right, I just want everyone to know I want to be cremated. And the first 2 years they looked at me and thought I was crazy. But you know what? We all know when any of us die, the whole family knows what's what and what we're doing now. And my brothers have advanced health care and everything's handled because I broke the ice. It just took 2 or 3 years, but you just got to talk about it as normal stuff. Yeah,
that's super. Maybe I'll bring up that I just did mine and talk to them about that. Yeah. All right, good point. Well, Vincent, you've been wonderful. I hope you come back on because I know you have so much more to explain to us and tell us because it is complicated.
I didn't have to look at my notes once.
I know you were concerned about that. I thought you know the stuff. I said to you know everything. Like you've been doing it for 27 years and you didn't have to prepare. I'm just talking to you and you're just answering. And, no, you've been great. And if you want to talk to Vincent, Attorney Vincent Liberti, please, 860-241-4048. He's based out of Hartford, Cheshire, offices all over the state. Feel free to call him. We're going to have his home now, so he's available right after dinner tonight. No, anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and such great information. I'm going to put some of it to use immediately.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I am going to say goodbye to you now, and we're going to have our little out segment. So thank you so much, Attorney Vincent, and we'll talk again. And everybody, we'll see you tomorrow night.
Hi, Deirdre here again. Thank you for joining me on Let's Talk Seniors Memory Care Issues. Is this an issue hitting home? Do you have a parent or loved one with memory care issues who you feel is not safe at home anymore? Are isolation, falls, and safety issues becoming a big concern? Welcome to Dogwood Senior Home. premier boutique residential senior living specializing in memory care. It's country living at its best in the Huntington section of Shelton, Connecticut. We're truly a home with only 6 senior residents living as one family unit. Senior residential homes are concepts sweeping the nation with 47,000 across the U.S. We're pleased to open Dogwood Senior Home as it will be only number 6 for Connecticut. Brand new, sparkling clean, opening mid-June. And safe, safe, safe. We are COVID-free. Residential care homes boast a very low COVID infection rate across the nation. This is due to the intimacy of size and speed in which the caretakers can shift to accommodate immediate needs. They are much safer than the large homes and facilities, as you can imagine. It has been documented that residents have less falls and a better quality of life in a residential home environment. Our home is more affordable than the big box facility. You pay one all-inclusive price, and that price is guaranteed for the life of the resident. With an incredible 1-to-3 caregiver ratio, which you won't find anywhere else. Our friendly, loving caregivers are dedicated and trained in Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's issues. We're only taking 6 residents, so the home will fill up fast. Call me at 203-689-7562 for a talk and tour. I would love to meet you and your loved one. See you soon. Bye.